So clearly this is the positive bit. Diversification is happening. Demography is on our side. But for that demography to turn around, unless we invest in that human capital, we may well become old before we become rich. And from that perspective, we need more work on this. Hope lies in the fact that women's collectives are there. Hope lies in the fact that 42% of the elected panchayat leaders are already women. And a large number of them have come out of the movement of the livelihood. It's true, Anjani Kocher's Stanford University study on the NRLM clearly brings out the fact that it takes 6 to 8 years for a women's collective to mature. Fair enough, it will take a little while. We'll have to have the patience for it. But this is the way forward. Human capital is the other one. The challenge, again, about incomes, employment, we will have besides human capital. So clearly in our journeys, if services is where the opportunities are, we have to move towards higher order skilling. We have to move towards higher order employment. We have to move towards employment where wages are much higher than what they are currently. So unless and until, because manufacturing, while efforts are going on, it might take a little. And again, when you look at these states that I mentioned, why is it that private investment goes to Tamil Nadu, goes to Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad, Telangana, goes to Gujarat, goes to a few other places? It's not only public infrastructure. A certain availability of human capital is also an important consideration. Why else will I make an investment? You may give me the infrastructure, you may give me other facilities, but if I don't have the human capital, in many cases, this has been a challenge. So when you have Sri Perembadur near Chennai, the entire industrial estate fills up in no time. Everybody wants to come there. But it will not happen in Bihar and other places. So clearly human capital does come in the way. So where we are well placed, the women's collective is one, decentralized institutions of panchayats and others, and the changing character of that leadership is the other. The third is the digital public infrastructure, which is a big positive. But again, as I said, we need to do much more on incomes, on employment, on human capital to be able to move at the pace that technology would like to drive us, that we will be in a position to make better use of it.
You delved much beyond the rural-urban divide, and you did touch upon how gender equity can uplift not just a woman but the society in itself. So moving to Venkat now. Venkat, you have an extensive experience with the Tata Group. At one point, you were leading the Tata Trust and driving significant developmental projects across various sectors. So you have first-hand witnessed, the transformative trends on particularly on India's rural development sector landscape. So with this and with your current role with the Karkinos venture, if you could tell us about, of course, one knows that rural India does lack access to quality healthcare facilities. And do you think that the advancement of technology and other innovative practices, what are some of the trends, and where do you see that if there is a possibility to bridge that divide between, or the gap between the urban and rural communities?
I would start off with a bit of disclaimer in the initial introduction about the genesis of TRI. I was one of the 3 or 4 people who were on that tour in remote Gumla, and this morning I was, just as a preparatory note, watching those photographs which your phone had taken almost a decade or so ago. We were not any rich industrialists or any great philanthropists. We were representing our organization on quote-unquote a field trip, which people at Pradhan or many organizations used to give us a dog and pony show. That's what we used to call. And this was one degree of unbridled freedom that one got to actually ascertain as to what the heck was happening. And many of those comments made almost a decade ago are relevant even today. And the aspirations of people, if we are not able to ride on those particular trends, we are kind of completely redundant and if not completely irrelevant. And the smartphones or phones that existed 10 years ago have got a lot more sophisticated today. And the extent of information asymmetry which many organizations used to thrive, I would say, by virtue of quote unquote sector professionals or development experts or foundations. We often underestimate the power of a rural woman who has access to education, access to knowledge. And today we literally, every single town or panchayat has its own television station as well, or a radio station as well. So we don't need to go and convey as to what we know and what they need to know. They themselves have their own ways of figuring out what their life is. So long as we don't stand in the way and be their facilitator and or a participant, and also be a keen observer and be humbler in our own approach to things, we would sort out. Coming specific to healthcare, taking forward what Sinha Sahab mentioned about some of the southern states and where we are with respect to the central, eastern and northeastern, I will just stick to the domain familiarity which we are currently associated with in case of oncology. When we look at capacity of cancer centers in the country, a couple of months ago there was a report of Frost and Sullivan which indicated that out of 740 or 741 districts, we don't know how many districts, many states are breaking up districts and calling them new ones, but 740 odd which they said, 175 of them have access to cancer centers, which they say are quote unquote having access to radiotherapy equipment. Out of this 175, 60% of the capacity is in West and South. That's where we are, and these trends we see literally in every single development milestone as well, on industrialization to the other healthcare infrastructure as well. In some of the other healthcare infrastructure, the public health infrastructure in states like Kerala and or Tamil Nadu in many ways is far superior to what you would see even in the private sector health infrastructure in places in central, eastern and northeastern India. That's a reality. Quality of personnel to people, the caregivers who are existing as part of the system, and it also significantly comes in by decades of empowerment, especially to women, which they have given over the years. So we should not underestimate that particular part. At the same time, what those states took perhaps decades to achieve it in this era of technology obliterating the extent of information asymmetry that existed, we can literally leapfrog a generation. And we were on a trip to Lucknow recently. One was pleasantly surprised as to what Lucknow was 10 or 15 years ago to what it is today. Literally 4 or 5 lane highways. The Jaguar Land Rover showroom in Lucknow was selling more cars than what you would otherwise see in Bombay, and which is quite fascinating. And the dealers don't get enough stock of vehicles for them to sell. And from the healthcare perspective, Medanta's own hospital in Lucknow is today a lot more thriving and profitable than many of the other Medanta hospitals than you see elsewhere. So these are some extremely emerging realities which we sitting in probably Delhi or Bombay cannot fathom to that extent as to what is changing at the grassroots. At the same time, much of our own awareness about healthcare is still, I would say, both on infrastructure and perception is still primitive. We are stuck in infrastructure which in many ways was an industrial era legacy of an infectious diseases type of setup, where much of the facilities were all based on accident, emergency, ICU, ICCU, people running around, as the case might be. But going forward, much of the diseases will be chronic diseases, which is your diabetes, hypertension, COPD, and several forms of cancer. Where people in South Bombay, a girl child in the age group of 9 to 13 has as part of the vaccination protocol. The country has finally introduced the vaccination program for HPV, but that's only applicable to 4 states in select districts. But what about the rest of the country? When we look at health systems of tomorrow, our own learnings can be by virtue of, we don't need to invent or recreate everything as to, unless we do it and that too in our own way, it will work. We can take the learnings of what has happened elsewhere, adapt it to our own environment, and then see as to what can we do with the degree of repeatability, replicability and scalability. And many of those things, we can do it as India first and world next, as what we have seen from digital public goods infrastructure. Too much of a super specialized approach. So healthcare also needs a multi-dimensional approach. Somebody cannot say, look, my area of specialization is left nose, I won't see the right nose, even though it's bleeding. You go and see someone else. It does not a one-size-fits-all approach for many of our own people and our participants. We really need to be the customer engagement manager, the relationship manager equivalent with the communities, and have whatever issue they might be facing. We would need to attempt to take a multidimensional approach to healthcare as well. And this has a direct impact obviously on life, but in many cases a significant impact on livelihoods. At the same time is a massive poverty, what you call inducing factor. So one chronic disease, debilitating factor. Of course, we have now Aishman Bharat and many schemes coming in, but that's just not enough. It just puts things like cancer, not only you die, you put your family also in perpetual penury because of lack of early detection and getting the diagnostics right in the first place. But the good part is many of these are completely preventable and indeed solvable. So we don't need to worry too much about it. And Dr. G.K. Rao, the former chief of AIIMS, used to say that cancer is a fantastic disease. So why 50% of cancers are preventable and 50% of the rest of the 50, if detected earlier, completely treatable. You find no such disease having those particular characteristics, except that we don't know. Unfortunately, willpower is more powerful than willpower. If you completely smoke, obviously you will get lung cancer at some point of time in your journey. And except we think we are immortal, we don't. In fact, Salim sir also some time back, India's largest insurance company owns majority stock in a tobacco company, which is ITC and LIC. It doesn't work in any other geography. So some of these structural changes, we will need to call the bluff and convey, look, we can't have dual standards for healthcare. We would need to look at and take a lot more holistic approach. And this is literally everyone's responsibility, not ours alone. And that too for chronic diseases which are quite latent in us, will not manifest as a morphological expression which we historically have been used to in treating. Unless I see it with my own eyes, I won't believe. When we go into microorganisms, much of it is like an operating system. We don't see it, we only experience it when we get hit by it with that degree of severity. So in that sense, one would urge many of the practitioners to be conscious of some of these emerging trends which are likely to hit us at a much more rapid pace than we think, because in the absence of it, things like cancer, it's a very dubious distinction for us. Globally, we are number 1 or number 2 for most forms of cancer, and for oral cancer, thanks to consumption of tobacco in whichever form, we are 40% of the global burden. Easy. Of course, you can say if you convince your wife, you can convince anyone. That's a separate story. Just as Neeraj bought 2 weeks of insurance by conveying what he did. So I would say in that sense.
First of all, it was delightful to be here. I think TRI is beginning to live up to the first word in its name. No doubt in my mind that those things will happen. Similarly, Amarjeet has had an incredibly, I've always envied his career. Imagine being Joint Secretary, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, and then Joint Secretary NRHM, and then after that retiring as Secretary Rural Development. But I would have, it's just the most amazing civil service career. So, but more importantly, he's lived during the era and seriously helped create those transformational changes. You heard about, the dramatic changes in secondary enrollment, and we'll see the impacts of all of that, including on female labor force participation rate in the next few years. It will unfold at serious cost to natural and social capital. We have really eaten up our environmental capital. Jal Jangal Zameen, the chutti ho gayi hai in this quest for growth and urbanization and all of that. And social capital has also got eroded. So to me, I wish Vivek was here, because, while I am a great fan of everything that happens in Silicon Valley, they need to also come to this, Karol Bagh Alley, and, or whatever, and, ultimately, progress is a human process. It's not, and Venkat, we are not just a bunch of DNA molecules, man. We are, yes, but that's such a sort of molecular view of life, and by the way, when I was in IIT fourth year, while studying communications theory, I came across the genetic code for the first time and fell in love with it, to the point where I actually applied to JNU for a master's in biotechnology. They didn't take me because they said, "Tumne to biology school mein bhi nahi ki." But so I really love DNA. Nothing against it, but the human and beyond human, the social phenomenon. See, there's something about the sigma that is more than the sum. So just as human beings are more than, our body is more than sum of our parts, we are more than the molecules that make our body. Similarly, human society is more than individuals. We may have a 5 trillion economy, but unless we fix our environmental capital, natural capital, and our social capital, we may not be a society worth living in. So thoda soch lene ka about all these things. And these are not, sadly, tech problems. These are problems which go beyond tech. And all these lovely things, I'd love to have a robotic maid to clean the dishes and all of that. But, it's very different from what you do about loneliness. In the same picture, there was also the robotic companion. And I think we are crossing the boundary line of comprehension there.
80 percentile, so certified mediocres. Anish is not, but I am actually a certified mediocre. And one of the powers that PGDFM offers, or IFM offers you with this certificate of mediocrity, is allowing you to be naive and very stupid. So that's one of the powers I have continued. So once I passed out, I was sent to the right place in a forest in Odisha. And I spent 4 years in that forest. And to be honest, I was born and brought up largely in Jodhpur, Jaipur. So not necessarily that I was in Bombay, etc. But even in those places, I didn't come across the poverty that I saw in Odisha in the forest. And the other interesting thing that I came across when I was interacting with these very poor people, that the factor that you think in cities, that poor beg, that begging doesn't happen. So it was quite surprising to me. And the third thing I did is, I used to ask all these people, what do you want to be? And invariably the answer was they wanted to be rich. But anyway, I was brought up saying poor are great people and rich are bad people. And here this was a completely confusing theorem where every good person wanted to become bad. They all wanted to become rich. So my quest started with this whole idea, how do you make poor people rich? And see, I was a forester, and I met Vijay Mahajan in 1999, I think, 98 or 99. asked him the same question. I actually told him I want to set up a fund to nurture the ideas that may help poor people become rich. And I'll define rich. Rich to me is when the day you have the ability to make choices, you become rich. So if you have the choice to eat 2 square meals a day, it doesn't need to be dim sums, it could be anything, then you become rich. You have a roof over your head, you become rich. You have a choice to send your children to school, you become rich. So I'm defining riches not by yachts and airplanes, private capital, but by a right of choices. I'll also take you back to 2000. You must have all heard about bottom of pyramid, but as we stand today, I'll split that bottom of pyramid in 2 parts. The first, I think a cliched statement I'll make, the pyramid of aspiration has become flat. So while we used to talk about the pyramid of aspiration is flat. So we heard that in different forms and manners, everybody's saying it. But today, a 15-year-old son of a very rich person and a very poor son, a poor person's son in a very remote village, have the same dreams. For a very long period of time, the aspiration and dreams of poor were very different. And pyramid of resource actually then creates all kinds of confusions. And I'll just give you a very bland statistic that on one side, we think there is lack of job creation in rural economy. On the other side, microfinance institution has 50% attrition rate at the CSR level. And the CSRs are 10th, 11th and 12th pass guys from the villages actually getting 20,000 or 25,000 rupees as salary, leaving their jobs in droves. And I'm talking about lakhs of employees actually. The entire microfinance institution pretty much get reinvented every 24 to 36 months. Can you believe it? So wow, what actually explains, if there are no jobs, what explains people leaving? And it's quite a quandary. And no microfinance institution with some of the best resources at their hand have been able to figure out why it happens. And there were many reasons to it, I won't go into them. But I'm just telling you the kinds of feedback that you get from the field confuses you a lot, especially to somebody who's as mediocre as me. So I think, how do you actually respond to this aspiration? And one of the ways probably I can think of is there are 2 ways you can look at. One is technology, and what technology does, it allows you to actually leapfrog common challenges. Some of those things have been discussed, but there are some others that I'll actually talk about as we go. The other part is capital, and I'm actually talking about financial capital. Financial capital is a necessary condition, may not be the sufficient condition, but necessary condition to allow you to use technology to leapfrog ordinary problems. And I think this is where the whole idea of impact investing actually comes into play. So what does impact investing do? So let me start by making another statement. All investments make impact. So when you invest to build a road, you make a significant impact. But impact investing and investing are 2 different things. And it starts from the motivation. So impact investing is when you start with a claim that you're going to deliver an impact. It ends when you actually prove, not necessarily prove actually, when you disclose what you did. It's not necessarily that you have to deliver the impact that you claimed, but you at least have the courage to disclose it. Now these 2 things differentiate between investing and impact investing, and it is important to keep this in mind. I'll take you through an example. I think the gentleman I'm talking about is probably going to be speaking in the afternoon, but so I met these 2 young guys in Samastipur in Bihar, and they had a very simple problem that they were solving. They said, you look around, यहाँ पे सारों तरफ गेहूं है, पर किसी फार्मर के पास पैसा नहीं है. And Samastipur is actually a wheat belt. And I want to create a grain bank. So I think बैंक तो बहुत सारे हैं. What is a grain bank? He said कि सर ये grain को जो है मैं convert कर दूंगा into a digital currency. Now these 2 guys are actually not necessarily from any IIT, IIM, etc. Both from Samastipur. And so I said I tried probe. So इसमें बैंक क्या हुआ? Long story short, the idea was as simple that there is no storage place for the grains. Storage normally is done, the warehousing policy is designed more for traders rather than for the farmers, because the quantum that is needed, normally a single farmer will not produce, so ultimately traders use it. How do you actually create a bank branch which actually resides within the village, allows the farmer to store the grain, but I use technology to convert the grain the moment it arrives into a digital currency, and I give a passbook to the farmer, and then instantly also credit his account to 70% of the amount value of the grain, and then keep giving him on a daily basis a right to sell or trade forward. And I will also give him the right to trade in 1 bag, 5 bags, 10 bags, 20 bags. Which means whatever number you want to trade, you don't need to sell everything at one go, you can sell in tranches. We gave them another 3 crores, which also they burned. We gave them another 2 crores, they burned. But to cut the story short, this company has just cost 250 crores in revenue. Came out of Bihar, anybody can go and visit, it's known as Argos. I don't know why Argos. They could have come up with a better name, which is local, but this is actually a story of ingenuity and what impact investing can do by taking extraordinary risks with great ideas of people. And then I'll try to connect this with sustainable development goals. So sustainable development goals, as most of you probably know, and I think all of us look down on politicians and bureaucracy, not nothing to you. But I think sustainable development goals is a collective aspiration of the global leaders to see a world that has never existed before. And I think it has never existed since the time Homo sapiens started walking straight. A world without hunger, without poverty, without inequity. And I think probably the most laudable goals any civil society would want to have. And so this came up in 2015. In 2018, Paul Polman invited me to join into a commission called Business Commission for Better World, Better Business, Better World, and we wrote a report. One of the questions was, what is it that the world needs to meet that goal? Specifically, and I'm being very specific on financial terms, not on other terms. And our calculations suggest that we needed $2.5 trillion of investment every year, starting 2018 till 2030, for us to reach anywhere close to the goals that Sustainable Development Goals wanted to reach, which is a world without hunger, without poverty, without inequity. Now, 2.5 trillion is a lot of money, and so therefore it was quite surprising. So we started looking at what is the total global pool of capital, and that turned out to be 400 trillion. So you are roughly talking the world to sacrifice 0.5% of growth for this entire world to be free of hunger, poverty, inequity. Now that's really where the whole idea and power comes into being, as to what is it that human ingenuity can offer. Can human ingenuity come up with an idea that will allow the greedy folks in the world who control the 400 trillion to give up that 0.5%? And I think carbon credits as a mechanism offers you one chance of how Kyoto Protocol was able to convince people to transfer money by actually trading in thin air, pretty much. So what a beautiful idea. You raise money, you give it to poor people to grow trees, let them keep the tree, the fruit, and everything else, and trade in thin air, and allow the assets and the capital to stay with poor people. I mean, I don't think so there is any more ingenious idea or a magic formula I have come across.
Clarity as to who they were and what they were doing literally on a real-time basis. Whereas literally today in every state, you see that Andhra Pradesh has made it a lot more sophisticated by using DBT. By press of a button, money goes straight. No power on earth can technically beat such kind of politics. Tamil Nadu, of course, they have been doing it for ages. But I think these are a couple of learnings, not taking the rough for these. Even on loyalty, if you take mafia, massive loyalty. There's no written contract, but the kind of loyalty that you see in mafia is literally to a different degree. Again, I'm saying, can we take those positive elements of some of those trends and apply it to rural development or the emerging mega trends that what we see?
And photogenic. You know, photosynthetic, of course, the whole green world basically exists in rural India. At the rate smog is going to affect our cities, there will be no photosynthesis possible here. Photovoltaic, already, you heard from Vivek Wadhwa. In 5 to 10 years' time, nobody would want to draw energy from the grid. And it's going to happen. 2 great opportunities. And photogenic, because देखने वाली जगह बचेगी तो सिर्फ रूरल इंडिया में ही बचेगी. शहर तो बद से बदतर हो जा रहे हैं.
It's just one sentence, I'll limit myself to just one sentence. I think social and human capital as the basis for a transformational economic growth and human well-being, which is environmentally sustainable and builds on the ingenuity of enterprise.
So, in 2001, the entire microfinance sector in India was 100 crores. And 2023, it's around 3,50,000 crores. If poor women who, and this includes the city, poor women who are uneducated, coming from north and south, can build a $50 billion industry, and Utkarsh Small Finance Bank listed, which is one of the banks that we supported, and straight away hit the upper circuit. It tells you the power that resides in rural India. So why are we so concerned about it? I mean, if they can build a $50 billion industry in 20 years, those women, if they were uneducated, imagine what they can do with educated. So.
Applause, everyone. Thank you.